Father Philip was on his way to his new posting at Sacred Heart Parish in Umuaka. He had prayed and prepared, but nothing could have warned him about what lay ahead. The afternoon sun was blazing when his car rolled past the boundary stone that marked the entrance into Umuaka. In an instant, the clear sky turned into thick, menacing clouds. Thunder rumbled. Heavy rain poured down so suddenly it was as if the heavens had burst. He tried turning on his headlights, but they refused to work. Confused, he checked his wristwatch. The time read just 3:30 in the afternoon, yet it looked like midnight. He pressed the brake and pulled over, but his car disobeyed, sliding forward slowly even though the engine was off. His heart pounded. "This can't be real," he whispered. He flung open the door and jumped out. To his horror, the car kept moving on its own, swerving toward the bush. The downpour slapped his body like knives, slicing through his cassock and leaving red marks across his skin. Trembling, he fell to his knees in the rain. "Lord, if you truly sent me here, protect me," he cried. At that instant, the car rammed into a tree and stopped. The rain ceased abruptly, but the eerie darkness remained. Shaken, Father Philip gathered himself. His clothes were torn to shreds, clinging to his body like wet rags. He hurried back to the car, pulled a spare shirt from his bag, and changed into it. Still trembling, he forced himself to continue driving through the heavy gloom. For a while the road was silent, except for the sound of his tires on wet ground. Suddenly, he heard a loud bang, as though his car had struck something. The engine died completely. Muttering a prayer, he grabbed his flashlight, but when he switched it on, the light refused to shine. His hands shook. With no choice left, he picked up his bag, stepped out into the suffocating darkness, and began to walk. The silence around him was unnatural. Then, faintly at first, came the sound of dogs barking. They grew louder, closer, until the growl and thunder of paws surrounded him. His heart raced as he darted into the tall grass to hide. The barking stopped. The dogs lingered, waiting, as if they could see him though he could see nothing. When he took a cautious step forward, they charged, teeth tearing into his leg. He cried out in pain and bolted backward away from the village. Strangely, with each step backward, the darkness began to lift. The dogs stopped chasing him. At that moment it became clear the village itself was rejecting him. Realizing this, Father Philip refused to retreat. Instead, he began singing praises, his voice loud and unwavering despite the pain in his leg. The more he sang, the calmer the night became. The barking faded until there was only silence, and by the time he staggered into the parish compound nearly an hour later, exhaustion almost overcame him. The building loomed eerily quiet. He knocked on the iron gate. Slowly it creaked open, and an elderly woman appeared, her wrinkled face lit by a faint lantern. "I am the caretaker," she said flatly, her eyes glinting strangely. Grateful, Father Philip dragged himself inside. But as soon as he entered the house, her tone changed. "You should not have come here," she murmured coldly. "Now you belong to Umuaka." Father Philip froze, shocked at her words. "What did you just say?" he demanded. The woman blinked innocently. "I said nothing," she replied, forcing a thin smile, and led him into the parish house. Uneasy, he followed, clutching his bag tighter. But through the window, he glimpsed 3 old women clad in black, standing in the shadows and chanting words he could not understand. His body went cold. Overwhelmed, he slumped to the floor and passed out. Father, are you okay?" a soft voice asked. He opened his eyes slowly to see a young woman leaning over him. She introduced herself as Amaka, the parish cleaner. Her short dress clung tightly to her frame, revealing more than it covered. Father Philip quickly turned his eyes away and sat up. "Where is the old caretaker?" he asked firmly. Amaka tilted her head. "Caretaker? There is no caretaker here. Only the cook and I are allowed into this house." Her smile widened as she twisted her body suggestively. Disgusted, he cut her off and told her to leave at once. As soon as she stepped out, he sank to his knees and prayed earnestly, asking God to give him strength and clarity to see what was real and what was a trap. Just as he finished, a knock sounded on the door. A young man entered, smiling warmly. "Father, welcome. I am Brother Keen, the parish cook," he said. Still shaken, Father Philip asked why he thought he wouldn't survive here. Keen's smile faded. "Because no priest has lasted here for the past 5 years. They either die before arriving or lose their minds. We had given up hope until we heard you were coming." His words sent shivers through Father Philip's soul. Ken continued speaking, but something about his manner unsettled Father Philip. As Ken turned his back, the priest's eyes widened in horror. For a fleeting moment, the man's body contorted grotesquely. 3 arms, 3 legs, and 2 wrinkled faces fused into one. Father Philip gasped, clutching his rosary. Quietly, he excused himself and hurried into the chapel. Dropping to his knees, he prayed with trembling lips. Lord, you know I did not send myself. You brought me here. Use me as your vessel. Unknown to him, the bishop had chosen him not because of his experience, but because of his purity. Umuaka had been chained in darkness for years, a place where anyone returning from the city either died or went insane. The only place untouched was Sacred Heart Parish, standing alone amid ruin. When Keen knocked again, announcing that food was ready, Father Philip gathered courage to join him at the dining table. Lifting the lid from the plate, he froze. The dish was crawling with fat, wriggling worms. He closed it calmly, left the table without a word, and pulled out the small snacks he had packed from his bag. That night, before sleeping, he sprinkled holy water across his room, marking the space with prayers and scripture. Outside, the enemies of light grew restless, plotting their next move. That night, the parish compound was restless. In the shadows, the old caretaker, Amaka, and Brother Ken gathered under a tree, whispering angrily. He refused my food, Kena hissed, and he turned me away without a glance, Amaka spat. The caretaker's laugh was harsh, echoing like broken glass. If he survives 5 days here, we cannot touch him again. We have only 3 days left. Their plan was simple. Father Philip had to fall into their trap, either by eating their poisoned meal or by giving in to temptation. At dawn, they decided to send Nenena, the women leader's daughter, a beauty no man had resisted. If she failed, they would forge the bishop's letter and send their own seminarian to assist him. Meanwhile, as Father Philip slept, they attempted to storm his room. Dozens of figures in black filled the compound, chanting as they marched toward his door. But just as they reached it, the wooden door turned into solid stone. No matter how they pushed, struck, or chanted, it would not yield. Inside, Father Philip slept peacefully, unaware of the battle raging outside. For hours they tried until 4 in the morning, when they finally dispersed in defeat. When dawn broke, Father Philip rose with surprising strength. He felt renewed, though the memory of the night before still clung to him. Stepping into the church, his heart sank. The place was filthy, dust everywhere, broken chairs, cobwebs covering the altar. So they have not prayed here in years, he murmured. Putting on his cassock, clutching his Bible and a wooden cross, he marched boldly out of the compound. As he walked through Umuaka's market, he sang hymns in a loud voice. His voice carried over the silence, echoing through the narrow streets. Villagers turned, stunned. A priest has entered our land, some whispered in awe. Soon men and women who had lived in fear for years came out, dancing and crying, praising God, but the evil ones watched with anger. This one is different. His spirit is clean. If we cannot stain him, we cannot break him, one muttered. Father Philip raised his hand, sprinkling holy water on those around him, and the people rejoiced. For the first time in many years, hope stirred in Umuaka. But behind the smiles, the conspirators plotted a darker scheme. Later that day, while Father Philip was still in the market speaking with the villagers, a letter arrived at the parish. It was from the diocese, announcing that a seminarian would be sent in 3 days to assist him. The conspirators seized the letter. With sly grins, they altered it and sealed it again. "We will send our own tomorrow," the caretaker whispered. "If Nena fails, our seminarian will succeed." That evening, Father Philip returned with a heavy heart. He had seen mothers mourning lost children, men chained to trees after running mad, and youths wandering naked like shadows of themselves. "So much pain," he whispered, his heart breaking. At the parish gate, he spotted someone waiting, Nena. She was young, beautiful and striking, wearing a revealing wrapper tied loosely around her chest. She held a steaming plate of jollof rice, the aroma rich and tempting. Hunger gnawed at him. He had eaten only wild fruits all day. For a moment he froze. She smiled sweetly, stepping closer. "Father, I cooked this for you," she said softly. He took the food from her hand but didn't enter his room. Instead, he walked straight into the sitting room. Hidden outside, the conspirators peeked through the window, whispering with glee. "Yes, we got him," they said. But to their shock, Father Philip did not touch the food. Instead, he covered the plate firmly and turned to Nena. "Never dress like this and walk into the parish house again," he said sternly. "Take your food and leave." Stung, she burst into tears and ran out. The conspirators hissed in frustration. Their first major attempt had failed. That night, Father Philip locked his room and even sealed his windows, praying before he slept. In the early hours, they tried again, but the same strange force turned his doors and windows into walls, barring them entry. By morning, the enemies were furious. They knew their time was running out. Still, they had one last plan, the false seminarian. Around noon, Brother Kine called to him. "Father, the seminarian has arrived." Excited, Father Philip rushed out to see a young man with a bright smile. "I am Brother Chisholm," he introduced himself warmly. Father Philip felt relief. At last, someone to assist him in the coming vigil. Together they began preparing for the program, walking around the village to invite the people. Chisholm cooked a small meal for them that evening, and for the first time since arriving, Father Philip ate. His guard fell slightly. "Thank God for you," he said, smiling. Little did he know, danger had entered his home. The day of the vigil arrived. By 6 in the evening, the church was already packed with villagers. Families carried their sick, their mad, their crippled. For the first time in years, Sacred Heart Church echoed with voices of faith and hope. Father Philip fasted the whole day, refusing food, though Brother Chisholm urged him to eat. By the time the service began, his stomach churned with pain and his head grew heavy. Still, he walked slowly to the altar. The villagers rejoiced, shouting and dancing at his appearance, but before he could begin, his body failed him. With a groan, he collapsed on the altar steps. Panic swept the congregation. "Father Philip must not die," they cried. They carried him quickly to the health center, praying and wailing. Outside, men, women, and children fell to their knees, pleading with God to spare him. Meanwhile, in the spirit, Father Philip was locked in a brutal battle. Dark figures surrounded him, clawing and striking, their voices hissing curses. He fought with prayers on his lips, clutching his cross tightly. At one point, the witches almost strangled him, and their laughter echoed. "We have him now," they rejoiced, but in the physical world, the prayers of the villagers rose like fire, breaking through the darkness. All night, Father Philip lay in a coma. The enemies danced in secret corners, celebrating what they thought was his end. But at dawn, something shifted. In the hospital bed, his lips moved. Slowly, his eyes opened. He began humming a hymn, his voice growing stronger with every word. Nurses and villagers gasped as he stood, frail yet unbroken, singing praise loudly. When he returned to the parish later that morning, Brother Chisholm rushed to embrace him. "Thank God, Father, you survived," he said. Father Philip nodded weakly, but just as he turned toward his room, he noticed the letterman sliding an envelope into the parish mailbox. Curious, he opened it. His hands shook as he read. It was from the diocese. "We regret to inform you," the letter said, "that the seminarian meant to join you was involved in an accident and could not make it to Umuaka. Please bear with us while we make another arrangement." Father Philip froze. His heart raced as the words sank in. He turned slowly to glance at Brother Chisholm. The young man stood behind him, smiling innocently. Father Philip's mind screamed one thought. If the real seminarian never came, then who exactly was this man in his house? Father Philip folded the letter in his trembling hands and forced a smile. "Yes, everything is fine," he said quietly, slipping the paper into his cassock. Brother Chisholm nodded, but his eyes glinted strangely. As soon as Father Philip entered his room, the false seminarian hurried to the back of the house where Brother Keane waited, his face twisted with rage. "He survived," Chisholm hissed, his youthful voice now harsh and ancient. "No one survives the venom I mixed in his food." His disguise melted briefly, revealing the frail, hideous figure of an old witch doctor, patches of fur across his arms, his voice echoing with malice. "Who is this priest that dares to defy us?" he spat. Keena scowled. "We have one more day. Tonight we will finish him, gather the venom of every coven member and prepare his final meal. Let's see if he escapes that." They agreed, sealing their plan with laughter. Chisholm returned to the house. his youthful face restored, carrying a pot of food. But to his surprise, Father Philip was already at the church gate, surrounded by villagers singing praises. "Come, seminarian," Father Philip called with a smile. "We will not wait for night. The prayers begin now." Inside the church, the atmosphere was electric. The villagers sang, clapped, and shouted prayers, filling the broken building with new life. Father Philip raised his cross high and led them in worship. Chisholm stood beside him, fidgeting. Sweat rolled down his face as the prayers grew louder. He tried to slip away, but Father Philip gripped his arm tightly. "Stay," the priest said firmly. Chisholm trembled, his body stiffening. Father Philip prayed louder, calling on heaven to expose every darkness hiding in their midst. Suddenly Chisholm screamed, his voice cracked, shifting from youthful to monstrous. The congregation gasped as his disguise melted away. Before their eyes stood a frail, filthy witch doctor, his body covered in scars and fur, his ears long and twisted. The villagers recoiled in fear, some rushing to the door, but Father Philip held firm. "You cannot hide any more," he declared. He reached behind the altar, pulled out a basin of water and a bag of salt, and prayed over them. Sprinkling the mixture, he commanded, "Show your true self." The witch doctor shrieked, collapsing to the ground as smoke rose from his skin. Then came a sound that froze everyone, the rhythm of drums, chants, and stomping feet. Father Philip paused, looking around. The villagers had fallen silent. He rushed through the window and his blood ran cold. An army of witches dressed in black marched in broad daylight toward the church. Each carried a clay pot, chanting in unison. The earth shook beneath their feet. For the first time since arriving, Father Philip felt fear. He ran to shut the doors, but the witch doctor laughed weakly from the floor. "You dared us, priest. This is our land. Tonight you are our sacrifice." His words crawled through the air like venom. Father Philip, heart pounding, sprinkled the last of his holy water across the church floor, then locked 2 doors and slipped out the third, sealing it from the outside. He crawled behind a collapsed hut and hid. The coven surrounded the church, their chanting rising louder. Some entered, others stayed outside, circling the building. Soon all of them were inside, filling the air with dark incantations. Father Philip crept back to the church's main entrance. With trembling hands, he locked it from the outside, trapping them all inside. For a moment, he could hear them laughing. Then the laughter turned into furious roars as they realized they had been caught. Their screams echoed across Umuaka. The witches pounded the doors, clawed at the windows, even tried to melt the wood with dark fire, but nothing worked. One by one, villagers emerged from their hiding places, drawn by the sound. They gathered around Father Philip, staring at the shaking building. Without warning, some rushed away and returned with kerosene. Before the priest could stop them, they splashed it around the church and struck a match. Flames erupted instantly, swallowing the building. The cries of the witches pierced the sky, sending chills through everyone present. Father Philip wept. "No, don't do this," he cried, but it was too late. The villagers stood unmoved, their eyes wild with a strange determination. The fire roared higher, smoke filling the air. From one end of Umuaka to the other, people heard the wails of the burning coven. But as the flames consumed them, something shifted. The heavy darkness that had blanketed the village lifted like a veil. Invisible chains shattered, madmen regained their senses, and sick bodies grew strong. Hope flooded the land again. Father Philip stood silently, tears on his cheeks. The battle was over, but at a terrible cost. The once holy church now lay in ashes. When the last ember died, silence fell over Umuaka. The villagers, relieved yet shaken, turned to Father Philip. He said nothing, only bowed his head and walked back to the parish house. Inside, he packed his belongings quietly. His mission here was complete. By nightfall, he began the long journey back to the diocese. Exhausted, he arrived just before midnight, collapsing at the bishop's doorstep. Hearing the commotion, the bishop rushed out. Father Philip clutched his feet, whispering through tears, "My work is done in Umuaka." The bishop nodded knowingly. "I sent you because you were pure, Philip, and heaven has used you." Word of what happened spread quickly. Umuaka, once feared as a place of madness and death, was free. A week later, another priest was sent to rebuild Sacred Heart Parish. Father Philip's name became known throughout the land. not for his age or experience, but for his courage and moral purity. Wherever he was sent afterward, darkness trembled at his arrival. Witches fled at the mention of his name. People called him the liberator of the oppressed, and his story became a reminder. Anyone can walk in victory if their heart remains pure and their faith unshaken.